Hi everybody, my name is Ellen, and thank you so much for joining us today. We are going to be talking to Ivan, or Ivan, how do you say it?
Ivan.
Ivan, okay, so we are going to be talking to Ivan, who is an anthropologist at UNLV. And what is your current level of education?
I have a PhD in anthropology, specializing in cultural anthropology.
And how long have you been working in anthropology?
I did my undergrad degree was in anthropology, and that I started that in 1998. So it's been a while, almost more than 20 years since I started my undergrad degree.
So how would you describe anthropology to a younger student, someone who might not really know what it is?
Well, that's a great question, and I would say that anthropology has different subdisciplines. So there's biological anthropology, where anthropology is trying to understand the evolution of humans as biological, as animals, and also trying to understand how humans adapt to different environments. There's also archaeology, which is anthropologists who study different cultures through the material remains, through digging and recovering artifacts and monuments, and trying to make those connections between groups that are still alive and in those materials that they find. And there's linguistic anthropology that studies the way in which language changes. For example, if we're thinking about the way in which we use the way in which we text right now, what does it mean to use different emojis, right? How has that changed the way in which we think about language? And I'm none of those. I'm a cultural anthropologist, and what cultural anthropologists do is trying to understand why is it that people do what they do, and how is it that people give meaning to what they do. I mean, if you're thinking about the things you do on a daily basis, we really want to think about how what we consider common sense, or the things that we do in a very sort of mechanical way, how is it that those things are historical? Where does that come from? Whatever you are eating, right? Whatever you eat during a family celebration, why is it that you're eating that particular thing? Where does it come from? Why do you do the things you do when you're with your family, when you're with your friends, and trying to understand sort of the larger context. For example, if you eat turkey for Thanksgiving, or if you eat something else for Thanksgiving, why is it that you're eating those things and not something else that also tastes good? And maybe even going a little bit beyond that, why is it that you think that some particular foods taste good and others don't, right? Because different cultures have different ways of perceiving food, of enjoying food. So how is it that those differences develop? That's like one way in which I would say that that's why we need to be with people when they are doing these things, to sort of understand what is it that they're thinking, how is it that they give meaning to the things they do on a daily basis.
Okay, so essentially it's just understanding why people, sorry, are the way that they are.
Yeah.
So what does a typical day look like for you?
Well, I say that there are two typical days for me, and one is when I'm teaching. Basically, what I have to do is read, prepare presentations, go to the university, and discuss different topics with students. The topics can be from anything that's taking place, for example, in migrant communities in the U.S., to religious practices in Thailand, for example, or wherever you can think of, because anthropology really talks about cultures across the world. The other sort of typical day, which is not very typical, is when I'm doing research, which mostly consists in going to places, trying to understand how people live, and I've done research in Oaxaca in southern Mexico. I did that for a long time, and basically a typical day consisted in living there in a community in rural Oaxaca and talking to people. Some people would say anthropologists do hanging out. A lot of our methodology consists of hanging out with people and trying to understand why is it that people do what they do. So it's typical in the sense that you are there, but because you're basically doing what other people are doing, it's not. I mean, it's not always that typical.
Mm-hmm. So you have two different typical days essentially.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
So during the school year, I have to teach and write and read a lot. And in the summers, when I'm doing research, I'm often in Mexico, which is where I'm from, doing research.
Okay. Next question is, what is the best part of your profession?
I mean, similar to the last question, I think the best part of my profession is knowing when students really like an article that I assign or have questions about an article, because often, although I've been doing this for a long time, students have a different set of eyes and they look at this information differently. So I also get to learn from students. The other part is when I'm doing research, right, is getting to know people that if I weren't an anthropologist, I would have never met. So being an anthropologist really allows me to meet people from very different parts of the world, very different than the people I regularly spend time with. And I think that's great. I mean, that's something that it's really hard to get if you're not an anthropologist.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you get to travel a lot, meet cool people.
Yeah, and people who are, I mean, very different from me, who are not working in academia, who are growing corn in Mexico, for example. So I don't know. That's really something that's really fun and that I miss when I'm not doing research.
What would you say is the most challenging part of your profession?
I mean, I would say that the most challenging part is that sometimes the people that I meet when I'm doing research are people that have really complicated, really hard lives, who are struggling because they don't have a lot of options, right? So sometimes going there and listening to their stories really makes you wonder what is it that you can do to change not only their lives, but also the lives of many people across the world who are struggling, not because it's their fault, but because of the way in which the world is set up to sort of allow some people to advance really quickly while putting a lot of obstacles for other people.
Okay, so you kind of have to be empathetic to people whose lives you might not really understand, or people
Yeah.
you've never met before. Okay.
Yeah, and also and also to try to when I'm writing about them, because a lot of what I do has to do with write about those people that I meet, right? How do I write about them in a way that people can relate to, not necessarily portraying them in like a very simple way, but rather as like human beings with flaws and good things and bad things.
My next question is, how does your profession give back to our community, or why is your profession important?
I think that's a great question, and anthropologists were always thinking about that. So first of all, I think through the classroom, when we're teaching, a lot of the things we teach to students at the university level, there might be the first time that these students are thinking about these issues of cultural diversity, of inequality, of the way in which different people get treated differently, and to think about this with students, I think it's great to see when they are sort of understanding that this is not something that is outside of them, but rather that they are part of this system, and they've been part of this system for their entire life. So I think that's one way, right, to get students to reflect on their own lives through anthropology. And the other part is also, like I was saying, sort of trying to write about people who don't often appear in history books, in official textbooks, and who are often left out, but who have a lot of important knowledge that we should be we should be grateful for the knowledge that they have, and we should be able to share it when they want to share their stories. So I think that's the other part, to be able to sort of talk about the struggles that people have, even if they are far away from where you live, or from where you were born, or whatever, right? But in a lot of these cases, these struggles of people are connected to what you do on a day-to-day basis. And I think it's important to bring these two things together. Students here in Las Vegas, who are going to the grocery store, buying blueberries, for example. Where are those blueberries coming from? Who's harvesting them? How is this connected to other stories that are larger than Las Vegas and that connect the entire world?
Okay, I guess this is my last question then. Do you have any advice for any students who are interested in anthropology?
I would say if you're interested in anthropology, there's a lot of things that you can look up online, and get a lot of different textbooks about things that are interesting to you. For example, if you want to understand different religious practices, you can start by simply going to a place where they're doing these things, and just talk to people. Because at the end of the day, what anthropologists do, we talk to people, and we try to, like you were saying, we try to understand where they're coming from, to create a sense of empathy. So if you're interested in something that's different, or even in your own practices, in what you do on a day-to-day basis, ask your parents, ask your guardians, tell them to tell you about why is it that you do that particular thing, and then try to understand if other people do the same things as you do, or if they do it a little bit different. Why is that? And I think that's a great way to start thinking about how we're all different, and yet we share we have a lot of things in common.
So it could be as simple as just asking your family questions.
Yeah, I mean, that's how you start in a lot of cases. You just start asking questions, and thinking about what other questions are there, right? So it's always about asking questions and more questions.
Okay, awesome. I like that advice. Thank you so much, Iván, for talking with me today. And thank you, everybody, for watching. I hope you enjoyed.